Hello, everyone. It's Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore, and hopefully things are okay today. Internet's back on. It came back on about an hour after we wrapped up last time, so for the cafe, I mean, yesterday. So things should be good. By all means, be checking in the chat and letting me know if you can see and hear okay, but hopefully things are fine. And just check in anyhow, just to say hi, let us know where you're coming from, and yeah, we're going to talk about music today. So that's always my favorite thing to be talking about. So we've got a couple of pieces that I specifically mentioned I wanted to take a look at here today. And so we're just going to jump in there. And Larry and Greg, you mentioned you might be able to be here at the beginning. So I'm going to you look at your piece first and just take a look and see if you're able to hear any of what I say live and enter in chat and so forth. But what I'm going to do is pop over to where your score is. So your score is you've posted it here and it's on, uploaded to musescore.com. It looks like you have download disabled, so I won't be able to load it into MuseScore, but it won't sound like it does for you anyhow because you're using VST instruments I don't have. So I'm just going to play what we have here. And feel free, if you are here, Greg, to give us a little background about this. Let me know what we want to know about the piece. Anything that seems interesting. And what I'm going to do is get this position just so I can still see. Because as I mentioned, the pinning feature doesn't seem to be working anymore. It was an experimental Chrome feature, and then apparently they unexperimented it. So we're going to take a look at this piece and just hear it. So what it is, well, you'll hear for yourself. It's kind of a nice kind of poppy, jazzy sort of feeling piece, and I'm gonna focus some on the voicings of the chords a bit because. This is, what we've been talking about, what I've been talking about in the musicianship skills projects, and we've been talking about voicing. So I'm just going to take a look at how that might work. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit play on the score, and we'll hear what we hear. All right, here we go. Shit. I'm sorry. That was me. That was me. I turned my mic down while we listened to the music. Greg, I think everyone else is seeing the picture. Everyone else was seeing the picture, so I think maybe you just need to refresh your screen. But yeah, my sound is back up. I unmuted my mic. Sorry, I muted so I wouldn't make noise while while we listened to music. So this time I'll just be quiet because I knew I would forget. Yeah, so nice piece, Greg, and hopefully you can get back on board here because, yeah, well, if not, you can check the recording. That's weird if it's not seeing, you're not seeing it because, yeah, it seems to be working for others. So, I know you have a lunch thing and maybe that's actually going to be more enjoyable than this. But yeah, no, hopefully the recording works out okay and you can check out what I say. So I'm gonna, say some things. So if you can't hear me, then, that's sort of a shame. Maybe someone, if I ask questions, someone could type into the chat. But I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the things that I'm seeing in here. So first I said I wanted to talk about the voicings. So I'm going to look at the left hand here. So it starts right off with and actually I should be logged in on my other machine so I could be monitoring and see if I see anything funny. So let me just do that real quick and see if I can get anything going. Give me one sec. Okay, so this is a root position E major 7 chord, right? And that's fine. It's a start right off. It's just the piano, and this makes perfect sense. What I'm going to do is take a look, though, at once everyone else joins in, including the bass. Once the bass comes in here, having the piano play the full root position chord like this all the time, I'm not saying you can't do it, but relevant to what we've been talking about with the thirds and sevenths, if it just had the third and seventh, it would be a little easier to play, and then we're going to come down and play the root, the bass hopefully has the root. Now the bass, your bass line doesn't have the root very much. It's more of a Jaco or Scott LaFaro based bass line. So the bass in this case doesn't have the root as much. But I would say this root in this octave here, only sounding at the beginning of the measure, isn't very root heavy anyhow. So I'm not convinced we lose anything. And what we possibly gain is having this, is actually, that's like a lot of activity, right? That at that tempo, that type of hand motion is not simple. So if it were simpled, if it were just, to just third and seventh, then going down to the root, that could make it simpler to play. So if you're concerned at all about playability of this, that could be a significant thing, especially because the right hand is really busy playing melodic things that realistically, we're gonna need our full attention. We're gonna need our brains to be focusing on what's going right, all this stuff here, and having the left hand be that active at the same time. I'm not saying it's not doable, but it's definitely asking a lot. So the other question, if Greg is around to answer, maybe someone can type it into the chat, is, Greg, are you intending any portion of this to actually be improvised? In other words, a lot of these lines feel like the character of improvised lines, like this might have been just sort of a sample piano part for portions of it. Portions of it feel like, no, this is actually composed melody. Portions of it feel more like they're more improvised in nature. So that's one thing I'm curious about. It's actually, yeah, it doesn't really matter. I'm just curious because it does affect how I perceive the relationship between the hands. Because if it's something that's actually composed and I know I'm going to play it exactly that way, well, then I can practice the exact interaction between the hands. If it's being improvised, I want to focus more on the right hand, and so I want my left hand to be simplified a little bit. So I want to maybe not rely on what's going on there. So these are some things to consider. So that idea, though, of voicing chords with just third and seventh, and so Greg, I haven't actually brought you on. If you think you're going to be around for a while, I can bring you on as a co-host. But I was thinking you said you were just going to be here a little bit, and then you had a skedaddle, so I wasn't going to bother. But I will. I'll invite you, and then it's up to you how to respond. So I will invite you as co-host. You're on twice, okay? So I'll invite you both times. And that probably has something to do with the problem. So I've invited you both, and then if you want to come on, you'll be able to click the invitation and come join. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and here I see you coming. Mike's not on. Greg, I see. I don't hear yet. Nope, you're gone again. All right, so I'm just going to keep going here and talk about some of the other things that I notice. So one thing that's really interesting, there's a bunch of really interesting things about this piece. One is the fact that harmonically, how would I put this? It's episodic is maybe a word I would use. In other words, it's not purely functional in the sense that, it keeps changing key, which is really interesting, but it changes key really in subtle ways, in like kind of shifts here and there. I'm going to keep flipping around every once in a while to see if I see Greg rejoining. So I'll make that easier here by disassociating that tab. It as it shifts keys, it's not like this sudden major key change. It just sort of moves surreptitiously through a number of different keys. And while it's in a key, it's not doing a lot of sort of really traditional functional things. It is largely diatonic. So like if we look at the beginning here, we would say it's in E major, and he's got an E major key signature. And now he's changed to a G major key signature just after 4 bars. And so now we have the B minor 7, the A minor 7, the G major 7, the C major 7, right? These are all back to G major 7. That's all perfectly diatonic within the key of G. However, let's take a look at that section, and I'm just going to do a little adjustment here as I play through it. So I'm going to play this section. This is where the G major section basically starts. All G major, all diatonic, right? Still G major, still diatonic, right? And it's just going back and forth between 1 and 4 at that point. So when I talk about it feeling episodic and not specifically functional, what I mean is within that G major section, there is not a single 5 chord. Right? There is not a single D7 chord to be found, which is, interesting that there's no 5 chord. So that is not necessarily, it's not a problem at all. It lends itself to this nature of how it keeps shifting around key-wise, because the more you really emphasize a key through 5-to-1 relationships, the more the ear is really honed in on that key and doesn't really want to move to another key unless you lead it there. So you just jumping directly from this G chord here. Now suddenly we're in E, right? There was no setup of that. There was no like little secondary dominant leading to it. There's just an E chord suddenly there. And you think, oh, we're in E, except then we, really it's just an E chord for like those 4 bars, and then it kind of returns back to that G major stuff. But then later on, there's more changes, right? There's a change now this time from G directly to A. Right? Suddenly we're in A. And now suddenly in C. And now suddenly in B flat. So the question is, are we really in those keys? Or are we just playing those chords, is my question. And it's an open-ended question. There's not a right and wrong answer to this, because if you just play 4 bars of an A chord, and then 4 bars of a C chord, and then basically 4 bars of a B flat chord. Yes, you have it marked as going back and forth between B flat and G minor, but really nothing about your actual lines here is suggesting that. It really still feels like it's all, based on that same tonality. There's not a strong low G to give us a sense of G minor here. So this part really feels like just 4 bars of B flat. And now we have our first functional chord, a diminished chord that's actually moving in a particular way. This is the first time we've had what I would consider functional harmony as opposed to episodic harmony. Episodic harmony is a word I just sort of made up. It doesn't mean anything in particular. It just means we have some chords that sound good, and then some other chords that sound good that are episodes, as opposed to, if you think about like last week, I talked about Star Trek. Next episode's on tonight. Yay. So the idea of episodic television, where each episode is its own self-contained unit, and then next week's episode doesn't really relate to the previous one, versus serial television, like soap operas, and then a lot of modern shows have elements of both, self-contained episodes, but they also sort of combine to tell a story. So that's the distinction I would make. So episodic is what's going on here. We have a C major episode. For 4 measures, we're in C major. And then for 4 measures, we're in B flat. So these episodes are, that's what's going on throughout this piece. And none of these have anything. None of these episodes, even that long G major episode, doesn't have anything functional. It doesn't have any circle of fifths motion, no 5-to-1 motions. It was all diatonic chords from 3 down to 2, down to 1, and then to 4, and then back to 1, and then back to 4, and then back to 1. Right? So those were the chords. So they were diatonic in G. It clearly established G without doing the 5-to-1 that would really cement that key of C. So it's a more floating characteristic. And the way your bass line and piano lines and all the lines are working, that's sort of emphasizing this. It's supporting that idea of being episodic because it's not very root focused in terms of bass notes. There's not like you call this C major 7 here, and it is a C major 7. But there's no low C, right? The bass is sitting up here in the upper regions of the chord. The piano voicing is here, is basically, oh God, can I even play that? Yeah, I guess I can barely play that. So there's a C major 7 voicing here, which again, if it was just 3rd, 7th, and 9th, that'd be an easier thing to deal with, or even just 3rd, 7th, and then root here. But still, we're missing the low root, which doesn't have to be there, but it's contributing to the sense of this being episodic and not functional because we're not hearing the strong root motions, 5-to-1 type root motions we expect. So the first time we get that is right here. So we've got this diminished chord, right? And now A7, and now C7, and then F. That C7 to F is the very first 5-to-1 in the entire piece, as far as I know. I don't remember there being any other 5-to-1s here. So this is the first point at which it feels like we're entering the world of functional harmony. And it's interesting what he's doing getting in here, because he's got this A7 and A flat diminished. I would call this G sharp diminished to emphasize that it's the leading tone going into A. G sharp diminished going into A is 7-to-1. This is also functional. This should, if you respelt this as G sharp, that would be clearer that this is tonicizing. G sharp is tonicizing the A. Now the leap directly from A7 to C7 feels very abrupt, but it's actually a fairly well time-honored technique that relies on the fact that they relate to the same diminished chord themselves. So if we take A7 and leave off the root, we have C sharp diminished. Add a 7th, right, or flat 9 on our A7. We have C sharp diminished 7. Well, that's also the chord that C7 would be related to. C7 also has this diminished chord in it, right? A7 is related to C sharp diminished. C7 is related to E diminished, but C sharp diminished and E diminished are essentially the same chord. Once we build them into sevenths, they are the same exact chord. So there is a logical to the ear relationship between the A7 and the C7. They're connected by that diminished chord. Now, this connection could be enhanced if you actually added that note, right, for the A7, actually added the B flat, because that would then tie it more. It gives you an extra common tone into the C7. And then you could also put the flat 9 on that C7, the 7th on the E diminished. You could do that. It's not necessary, but I do think that adding that B flat into this measure might help. And I don't know about help, but it would help support what's going on harmonically. And maybe not right at the beginning, maybe somewhere in the middle of that measure. So I'm just going to play a B flat when I get to that point. Actually, I'm going to start a couple measures before that. I'll start right at the B flat section. Oh yeah, we're in B flat anyhow. So anyhow, bringing in that B flat somewhere in that A7 measure helps tie it to the C7 and really helps set up this motion into the F, this really strong 5-to-1 motion. And because it is such a strong 5-to-1 motion, I would love as an arrangement thing there to make this be that much more strong by actually, even, everywhere else where I said you're not very root focused in the bass and it's giving it this floating feeling and it's pretty effective. This is the first place where I would say, yeah, no, give me that low F. Give me that C, F going into here. And this time I'm going to play that. To really say, oh, I just did something here. I actually created a 5-to-1 and have achieved a particular point of, I don't know what you call it, a point of inflection in the piece, an important dramatic arc to the piece. Because as it is, when you have episodic harmonies like this, that's the thing that's, you have to go out of your way to make those things happen because the episodes can work individually. The thing that helps it tie together is finding opportunities to tie these episodes together like that. Have a running joke through your sitcom if it's that kind of thing or whatever. But or a 2-part episode, right? To have some suspense at the end of one episode going into the next, even if otherwise they're episodic. So this feels like this could have been the 2-part episode, that C7 into F. And that drama by creating the tension on the C7 and then resolving it at the beginning of the next episode here in F, that would kind of achieve that effect. And at this point, then I feel like it's kind of living in the world of functional harmony a little bit. In fact, this chord progression, Colleen, you might recognize this. This is essentially going to be Blues for Alice chord progression, kind of, sort of, if I make one little change. Let's check this out. F, right? So F, F. Now we got E. Now if I go to A, to D, right? So did I just hear Greg? Are you here? Did I hear a voice? Hey, someone's here. Greg, is that you? Oh, I see you, but I still don't hear you. The question is that at my end, because you're not muted, should be everything I have hooked up should allow you to be heard. That's going into here. That's going into there. I should be hearing. Can anyone else hear Greg? Is the question. Greg, could you say something? And if it's just me that can't hear you, then that's interesting. But can anyone else hear Greg? Is the question. So it's going to take a little bit. Oh, I can. Yeah.
What about now?
In my other headphones over there either. So, all right. Oh, there you are. Hi. I heard you. Briefly. All right. Well, so this time
What about now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll stick with that one.
All right. Yay.
But now I've lost my screen. Let's see if I can get that.
Okay.
There we are. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. So, nice piece, and I'm really enjoying just sort of like running through it and talking through this stuff. And I know you mentioned you had somewhere else you wanted to be, and I'm sorry if this messes you up. Are you good to be here a few more minutes?
I can be here 10 more minutes max.
Right, that's fine because I'm going to move on to another piece soon. But let's since I've been talking and addressing all these things at you, here's your chance now. Address like first of all the improv thing. Is this intended to be like something that someone might possibly replace with some improvisation?
Well, I certainly wouldn't mind but when I wrote it, uh, the thing you would probably never guess, when I wrote this, I played no piano. I had played a little bit. I had not played as a kid. I played a little bit in my 30s. Didn't play for a long time. I'm in my 70s now. Um, and I got, MuseScore got good enough. I started being able to do stuff in it, and then I just went crazy composing stuff. And so this was one of those uh, many pieces that I wrote where I was sort of trying to tap back into what I did know about piano, pay a little bit of attention to what's playable and what isn't. But then subsequently, so I wrote this, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And finally, sometime during the pandemic, I had all these pieces I had written, couldn't play. And I finally decided, oh, well, I might as well take up keyboard again. So a year and a half into it now, but
All
very,
right.
very seat of the pants, I would say, is my approach. I'm not formally trained in music, but I've acquired quite a lot of, music theory understanding over the years. I'm married to a cellist who
Ah,
did have a classical education, so we've had lots of conversations.
nice. So, great. That is wonderful information to know. So then, did my comments about the playability of the piano part make sense? I mean, they are technically playable. They are probably, I would say, harder to play than they need to be for what they are doing, if that makes sense.
I think I just got in on the end of those
Ah,
comments,
okay.
and so I'll go back and review them. It certainly is something that I am interested in. I don't want to make it any more difficult than it needs to be, for sure. So,
So yeah, my observation is, you've got all these really interesting motions. I mean, some places where there's just chords here, it would be nice, the pianist basically just hitting the chords. If you were writing this for a jazz player, I wouldn't even bother writing in the notes. I would just put in the B minor 7 and some slashes and let the pianist figure that out. And then the question is, how many of these lines, these little and how many of those sorts of lines are integral to the composition versus things you would trust a pianist to improvise themselves. Because yeah, that would be something to work out. Which lines feel more integral, which feel more improvisatory.
well, I mean, couldn't a bold improvisational piano player just sort of do that? Just
Oh,
kind of,
absolutely.
yeah.
But the question is, right now, when I look at this, it's not clear from a compositional standpoint, are any of these lines like going to be reused later? They're important, like important enough to the composition that I'd better play them as written. Because I would want those to be written, and any ones where you're going to trust the pianist to fill things in to be, identified as such. Like if this particular line at letter A here, if that line there is like an important line that's going to come back in the piece, I want to know it. But if it's just some eighth notes that are filling, and I can fill in my own eighth notes just as well, I want to know that too.
Yeah, I'd probably have to leave that up to you at this point, or go back and spend a lot more time taking a look at this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, either of those are fine options, but this is, I would say, part of what leads to the episodic nature. The fact that the chord progression repeats in interesting ways, modulates through different keys, has other sections happening in it, and certain melodic ideas, certain little motifs keep recurring. But as far as there being one like central theme that then comes back, and I'm like, oh yeah, he's back to the original theme. I'm not sure if that is the case. Is there what you would call one central theme in this piece?
My wife and I have that discussion a lot because she's very theme oriented since she's spent her whole life, playing classical literature. And I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because I don't think it's a great idea. It's just that it just wasn't my pathway to composition, and so I haven't really integrated the whole idea of using themes all that well.
Okay. So, I mean, that definitely is how this sound. When I use the word episodic, that's what it means. Each episode makes sense in itself, but, there's not an obvious big picture theme, plan to like, oh, here's how I'm going to take this theme in the beginning and then let it come back later. I'm not sure that that would improve the piece. It may or may not. But in any case, it's definitely worth exploring the idea of, okay, now let's write a piece that's a little less episodic that has a particular theme that I'm going to reuse, perhaps develop in different ways. Because that would be the one big picture thing that I might want to think about in a piece like this is, are there opportunities to reuse material in that way for the use of for the benefit of the listener to have some familiarity as the piece progresses.
I actually wrote a few pieces at one point. I was sort of exploring the Western modes. And so I started with some studies where I was taking some kind of little theme that I wrote and taking it through all the different modes. And then I wrote a couple of actual compositions, which came out surprisingly musical. I mean, I was really surprised myself because it was such a kind of weird way to approach the thing. But maybe I'll go back and look at those because I had to do a theme approach in that one because
Gotcha. Yeah.
Otherwise I would have lost my bearings entirely.
That makes sense. So like this passage here, starting in C minor, where we have the C minor here, I'm looking at the melody on that passage, and if I'm doing my math right, this melody is not the same melody that you started with transposed, but it is related in a way. And the chord progression is quite related. In the key of A flat, this is 3 going directly down to 2, and then going directly down to 1. So this passage here is exactly the same as the original passage, but transposed a half step. And the melody is identical. I wasn't sure if it was identical or not. So this bit of melody right here, measure 10, is exactly the same melody that we get again when it moves into A flat. So that much at least is a theme. Was that deliberate?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I don't know. Okay. Probably not. Probably. Okay. It's just all coming out of the same fountain, you know.
And that is an excellent observation. Sometimes, even if you don't intend to develop a theme, once I start talking about pink elephants, for the next few minutes, if I talk about pink elephants for like a minute, I guarantee 3 minutes later, someone's still going to be thinking about pink elephants because, once you got your brain going on that track, it wants to keep thinking about that. So yeah, I totally believe that even if you didn't intentionally reuse that same a lot, but it really is. This is exactly the same melody that you had before. I mean, there might have been one note different, but it's essentially the same melody you had at measure 10, up a half step.
Great.
Which is good.
Thanks so much for doing this, Mark. I do have to go.
All right.
I'll review the recording, and I look forward to it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Greg. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all your participation in the community.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. By the way, did you find a button to get out of here, or do I have to? Oh, he found a button to get out of here. Nope, he found a button to turn off his camera is what he found. Sometimes, supposedly, it's possible for someone to remove themselves as co-host, and maybe that wasn't originally there. So anyone who's ever been brought on board like this, you might want to let me know if you ever saw an option to leave as co-host while staying in the stream. So Greg may have just left entirely, but it is definitely possible, supposedly, to leave as co-host while staying in the stream. And co-host is what allows you to be on screen. So I've just brought Larry on because now I want to talk about his Black Orpheus arrangement. So basically, just to wrap up the thing with Greg, yeah, that was a great piece. And those episodes, there were more episodes like that. And just bringing in a couple more of those circle of fifth note motion sorts of things like I mentioned would bring it to another place. Finding some opportunities to develop themes further, to repeat themes further, would also bring it to another place, but I really like the place it's in. Okay, Larry, how you doing?
Hello there. Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm looking at my, I'm sitting on the couch, so my camera's moving, and I have an interesting lighting situation.
You are a silhouette. You look like you're in a witness protection program. Nope.
I definitely, there's a little
And now I got a
reflection
little
off my
reflection
head.
going there. Yeah, so that's something there. That gives you a little light. So, now you're not wearing headphones, are you?
No.
Okay. I hear just the tiniest bit of the echo going on in there, but if you're not hearing anything bad and no one else is, we're not going to worry about it. But in
I'm fine.
general, go
I'm
ahead.
good.
Okay.
Yes, I'm good.
All right. So, yeah, I want to take your Black Orpheus piece and your arrangement here. I mean, it's obviously a Brazilian classic, and just talk through a little bit about what you're doing here. And I'm going to play it for everyone. But before I do that, if you want to tell us anything about your process in arranging it, your thoughts behind it, etc., before I hit play, let us know.
Okay, well, the first thing I should say is I didn't give any attribution to the real book, but you probably recognized it as essentially a note for note um, lift from the song in the real book. And then I just added bass lines and I found a bossa nova type rhythm and I just put that in there just to kind of play with it and experiment to see
Mm-hmm.
what you could do with the idea that at some point you could drop the melody line out and you could improvise over it.
Mm-hmm.
And which is basically all I've um, really done. Um, the idea of I haven't had the time necessarily to, I've written a few things, but like the gentleman before me, I haven't had time to really focus on something. So,
Sure.
but it was really fun. I went through the thirds and the sevenths. I'm sure I made some mistakes. When like instead of doing a flat, I did a sharp, or I could have missed a major and a minor third here and
It's
there.
It's
But
possible when
um,
I listened to it, I didn't notice anything, but we're going to hear it again, and then we can talk about see if that is the case.
great.
All right. So yeah, I'll go ahead and just hit. Oh, before I just hit play on it, I'll play it within MuseScore unless you're using some special sound fonts that require me to listen to it online or anything. Any reason
No,
why? Okay, then I'm just going to let MuseScore play it, so that way I have a little better control over things and we can do stuff with it. So here we go. This is the arrangement. Larry's arrangement of Black Orpheus, which is Louis Bonfa. I don't even really know how you pronounce the name, but that's how I. Now, if you really wanted to copy the original real book, you would have said Louis Bonfi because there was a typo in the original real book, and so for years everyone thought his name was Bonfi instead of Bonfa. But that is fixed in current versions of the real book. All right, let's hear. All right, I'm gonna, in the interest of time, skip the
sure.
repeat and just play out the ending because it has a distinctive ending, right? So let's hear that here. Bam.
That's right.
Did you deliberately want to leave us hanging on that E7, or did you just sort of run out of measures?
Well, that's kind of what I think I wanted it to fit on one page or you know what I mean?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So
And
I think I kind of left it there. I mean, it's you knew
I knew
what
what was coming, right? We're all expecting that one chord at the end. So yeah, so no, this is really uh yeah, this use of the thirds and sevenths, it really illustrates the principle that I've been trying to talk about, which is when you have just the third and seventh in the left hand, you think you don't have a lot, but by the time you add the bass, dealing mostly with roots and some additional motion, and you have a melody that's adding other stuff on top, it doesn't obviously sound not full. And all it would take is one additional note. Like in this week's lesson, I posted about adding color tones. And if I just take exactly what you have here and add those color tones, right? So all I did was added exactly the ninth or 13th that my lessons talks about, and substituting the fifth for the sixth in the specific place where you had a minor chord. And put in one flat 13th in a particular place where we had a dominant tonic resolution there, which are all the things that I'm talking about. So yeah, that technique works great. Now, but you are a pianist, though, right, Larry?
well, sort of. I never took lessons. It was kind of one of those things I wish I did. I was a guitar player most of my life, but I hadn't had much training there either. About 12 years ago, I met a gentleman who was a jazz guitar player, and he was the one who introduced me to the real book because I played by ear, but he introduced me to the colors,
Mm.
like you say, or he showed me the chords, I think is how he explained it. And so I got interested in that, and as soon as I saw the real book and all the chords and the coloring and stuff, I immediately switched to piano. I
Aha.
haven't I haven't looked back. But I played piano, but my father had lessons, but he showed me a few things. And playing popular music, it's basically just majors, minors, and dominant sevenths,
Mm-hmm.
and listening and learning things by ear. So I think I'm really good at picking things out by ear and just playing them. I don't necessarily really know where I am all the time, um, but I think I have a broad understand. I think the first song, the guitar player, I can't remember. Da, 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 well, anyway, it was the first song that he taught me
Mm.
on guitar as a jazz guitar, and I just can't remember what it was. But um, anyway, I kind of lost my train of thought there. But
Happens to all of us.
yes, it does. So, but I love the um, uh, the knowledge that I've gleaned. Oh, I took. He passed away, so about around 2018, I signed up for the 300 level jazz piano course at Berkeley Music,
Mm. Okay.
and everything that I had been studying, they that's what the course was about. It
Nice.
was yeah, and it was interesting because I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's volume three of what is it? I'm it's Jamie Abersald.
Jamie
Is
Oversold,
that
yeah.
who? Okay, volume three. In the back of volume three,
I don't
it
remember which one is
has.
volume three. Do you remember the name of it?
It doesn't remember. I can't remember,
Okay.
but
Okay.
it has all of the voicings.
Oh, yeah. Okay. There you go. Yeah.
a chart of the, and it may be in multiple, but he told me to get a few of these Jamie Aebersold books until I did, and I had been studying volume 3, the chord charts, your four
Mm-hmm.
note chords,
Okay.
and going through 2-5-1s and stuff like that, and so I did really well in
Nice.
the Berkeley jazz class, and
Yay.
then that's all I have. And then of course I stumbled onto MuseScore, which is wonderful because um, you can if you're not really good at reading, sight reading, you can enter the notes in and you get this immediate feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
And
great.
so it's a learning tool. And I mean, you can sit down, or I can sit down at any day and come up with something and put it together just like I did here,
Mm-hmm.
and with the idea that well, someday I'm going to come up with something really good.
Well, no, and
And
I've seen some of the other things you've posted too. I mean, you've definitely got some things going on. You're off to a great start, I would say.
well, thank you.
So I want to talk about a couple of the things that you've alluded to here and expand on them a little bit. So first of all, for people who aren't familiar with Jamie Aebersold, this is now really old school. How people old school, semi old school, like 70s old school, how people used to learn to play jazz and still do in different versions. You would have these recordings. You would buy albums, right? Actual, like, black round things that you stick on a record player. And LPs, that's the word I'm looking for. And it would have a trio playing just the accompaniment. And then you could then improvise over it. And if you were a pianist, it was very cleverly set up where the piano was in the left stereo channel, the bass was in the right stereo channel. So if you turned the balance control on your stereo all the way to the left, you would only hear piano and drums, or turned it all the way to the right, you'd only hear bass drums, or whichever way it is. I can't remember. So you could either hear piano, bass, and drums, or piano and drums, or bass and drums. So if you were a pianist, you could practice with just the bass and drums, and then each volume would have, like, say, 8 songs on it, and 5-minute versions of each song for you to practice playing along with. And you could play the melody, you could improvise, you could play chord voicings, do whatever you wanted to practice with them. Now there's all sorts of apps and things to do that with, and you could also use MuseScore for that purpose. But for a huge chunk of, like, for my generation, people coming up learning to play jazz in the 70s and 80s, Aebersold records were it. That was how you went ahead, and that is how you learned the language. And then the books that had the music in them for you to play, because the record would come with a book. The book would have the music, just the lead sheet there, but in some of the volumes, it would have actual written out voicings. And so that's what, I guess, that volume 3 was one of those.
Yeah, it was really good. There was there was a Miles Davis one,
Mm,
which was really good that I got, and of course the Charlie Parker one was
that was the one I had.
way beyond me. But I learned, I can chord through the songs,
Good.
and
Yeah.
you know it is what it is. At
Well, that
some
is your
point
task as a pianist.
you got to go with what you got at some point, right?
All right. Yep. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play through part of this just listening to the bass and drums. So with MuseScore, all I got to do is just select those 2 staves, and it will just play bass and drums. And now I'm going to play the melody. In my left hand, I'm just going to play the thirds and sevenths, but this time, instead of just playing them as whole notes and half notes, I'm going to just do a little rhythmic something with them. I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's just going to be something hopefully that fits. So I all I did was fiddle with the rhythm. I fiddled with the rhythm both of my left hand and right hand. And now this is what a jazz pianist does. It's playing the melody if it's your job to, if there's not like someone else dealing with the melody, and then playing these voicings in your left hand, and often just the third and seventh is enough. But if I just add the one color tone, like I talked about in this week's lesson, just adding a single color tone, So, it occurs to me also, I've probably missed any comments in the chat. Yeah, Music Minus One is the classical, and that's a slightly older generation. Those first came out in the 60s, but yes, same exact concept. It would be a concerto or whatever, where you would play the solo part. So, what I just did, this is what jazz pianists get paid to do. Someone's going to call you up. If you know how to do that, someone will call you up and give you $100 to do that for 4 hours. That's exactly what in fact, you don't even need that. Because if someone's going to hire you, it's probably the saxophone player or the singer, and all they really need you to do is what I did with my left hand. In fact, you could leave your right hand at home if you wanted, and just go. Let this time I'll. There's no way to actually. I'll sing the melody this time. Boo da 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 da. At some point, I actually knew some English lyrics to this, but I can't remember them. So, all you got to do is that. And then, the next step is you learn how to supplement that with something in your right hand. And it can be really simple. Like this time, I'm just going to supplement in octaves. I'm just going to take some note that kind of fits the chord, the scale, whatever, and just add it in octaves. Ooh, da, 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 da. Ooh, da, 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 da. Ooh, da, 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 Right? So that is what you get paid for. Just to do that. That is your basic level of competence, where once you can do that, then you are ready for your gig. That's, and then, there's other stuff you eventually want to do, but that is a core skill. So, I'm curious, Larry. You went through all that training and did that stuff. Do you work professionally? Have you worked professionally on either piano or guitar?
No, I never have.
Is it?
And
Have you
I'm running
showed
out
up
of
at a jam
time.
session? Okay, have you
Well,
tried showing up at a jam session or something where you get to play with other people?
you know, I, I did go to the community college because I had heard that they had a program, and I went and I signed up to be the piano player.
Hmm.
But I was just way over my head because it was there were a lot of horns. It was the community college jazz band, and
Gotcha.
they weren't young people,
Mm-hmm.
they were mature people, and they all knew each other, and it was a big room filled with horns, and I'm I'm sure you would know the pieces that they were playing, but they were the large musical scores like
Mm.
we've seen, and I tried to muddle my way through. But I they didn't want me to quit, but I did,
Yeah.
and I think I went and actually moved to Texas and worked on a fracking crew for a while.
Oh
So
gosh. Wow. Okay.
so I did try to do that. I really comping for horns, I guess, is
Yeah.
as
That's what I'm talking
what they,
about. Yeah.
yeah, what they were looking for. And um I if I would have done this first, like if you that little uh uh instruction you gave me 10 minutes ago,
Hmm.
um I would have been more prepared. But I was probably expected to read the actual music.
Ah. Oh, was
It,
okay. So they were like those kinds of arrangements. Yeah.
yeah, in real time, and
Gotcha.
with the sheer number of pages, people having them taped
Oh
together
yeah. Yeah. That's
because
yeah.
there's so many instruments going by at one time. It was I couldn't even follow along. I mean, I could comp my way through it, but I was way over my head.
Gotcha. Now there are, for anyone else who's like, in this situation where you're thinking about this, many communities across the world have some sort of environment that is a good breaking in kind of introduction to the idea where if you've got a basic set of skills where you can, do this and play these 3-note voicings or 4-note voicings and add a note in the right hand just to be able to do some basic accompaniment. There are like a lot of cities, there might be some club somewhere where they do a jam session like every Thursday night or something, and then you just show up and different groups of people will just play and say, who wants to come up and play, we're about to play Black Orpheus, who wants to come up and play. And those typically are very sort of forgiving things, and you just have to know, just that one tune, and then someone else comes up. There's also like in Denver, where I live, we have an organization called Colorado Jazz Workshop, and Colleen Vanderhook, who's probably left to go to her other class, that's actually not where I met her, but that's where I worked with her for a number of years, playing in one of those ensembles that I directed, and she was the pianist for it. And you learn, and it's sort of like that community college experience, but it's a maybe lower pressure sort of thing because it's not like associated with an actual like school and all the pressure that goes with that.
Yeah,
So
these
yeah.
people were really good. They were really good.
And sometimes
So,
that's true in these community things like the Colorado Jazz Workshop, but then they try to like segregate, okay, the really good people who have high expectations of themselves and of everyone
right.
else, we'll put them in one group, and then the people who are more beginners, we'll kind of put them together in another group. And so with that organization, they've got like, 5 to 10 different groups going at any given point. And a lot of cities have organizations like that can be worth seeking out because there's nothing like that experience of playing with other musicians and trying these ideas out if you're trying to play jazz or anything in that any sort of ensemble music like this you want to play in an ensemble.
Yeah, well, I'm getting there.
Where
I'm
in
getting there,
you said
but
you're in
I'm
Texas?
no, I'm in Las Vegas. I
Oh,
live in
okay.
Las Vegas.
Yeah, well then
So,
I'm sure that exists.
yeah, there's stuff out there. It's just, when you're trying to meet people and you're not really you're not a pro. See,
Yeah,
I'm not a
no,
pro.
yeah, I hear
See, a
you.
lot of these people, like even in this right here in MuseScore, I mean, these people are pros, probably some of them.
Some, it's all over the place here. So,
And so
yeah.
when you're trying to, I've kind of always said, anybody that wants to play with me, I don't want to play with them. But and any right and but all the people that I would want to play with, they wouldn't want to play with me. So
Ah,
I don't
well,
know.
I would be open to the possibility that can happen in your life. Okay, and just put it out to their universe and then see what the universe says about it. Okay, so anyhow, I got to wrap up here, and thanks for the music. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for the comments. Dave, I see you're talking about playing some actual shows, and yeah, that is a pressure situation. Playing an actual show like where there's a script and everything's like got to go at this. Oh my gosh, that is some of the most pressure-filled situations I have been playing shows. So what I'm talking about, if you've ever done that and felt intimidated, yeah, what I'm talking about is a different level of relaxedness. Everyone's just sitting around with their drinks and having fun. That's the theory, anyhow. All right. So anyhow, we'll end this here right now. I'll play out some music. Thanks again, Larry.
You're welcome.
Okay. So let's just play out some music here. We don't need to see it. I'll talk over this, and thanks again to both Greg and to Larry for the music, for the conversation, and yeah, it was nice to be able to really just dig into a little bit of these things and talk about some of these ideas. We'll just keep doing this. I want to keep doing more different things in here. Some sessions like this, some sessions like the ones that we've done where we're just doing ear training. That one where I did no camera, no screen share at all, right? And we were just trying things purely by ear. I want to do more sessions like that. We're going to do cohorts of the courses, of my harmony courses and so forth. So I got all sorts of things kind of lined up, planned that we'll be digging into. So I look forward to seeing you all next week. Okay, bye everyone.